The Young Messiah is directed by Cyrus Nauraste, written by him and Betsy Giffen Nauraste. It's based on the novel Christ the Lord Out of Egypt, written by Anne Rice, and it stars Adam Greaves-Neal, Vincent Walsh, Sarah Lazaro, and yes, Sean Bean. And The Young Messiah is simply put about the early years of Jesus Christ's life. I think he's like 7 years old in this movie, and he, Mary, and Joseph have just returned to Nazareth from Egypt, but little do they know that there is a Roman centurion out there named Severus, played by Sean Bean, who aims to kill him on orders from Herod. Now, the reason why I watch this movie and why I watch a lot of these biblical or Christian-themed faith-based movies is not because I'm very religious myself. If you know me personally, I'm not necessarily like that. But I do think that this subgenre has a lot of potential. If you look back in the old days when, the Ten Commandments came out, or Ben-Hur, the original, came out, these big religious movies had big budgets and they were popular. But now that kind of subgenre is kind of dying out. But I still do think there is a lot of potential in these stories if they're handled well, like how Darren Aronofsky did Noah, like 3 years ago, I believe. So I'm always interested to see what new things are going to bring to the table, and the subject matter here was really interesting because, the young life of Jesus Christ was never really explicitly stated in the Bible. Unfortunately, The Young Messiah as a film is ultimately just kind of pointless. It has a lot of pretty bad acting in it as well, although superficially speaking, it does look kind of decent. Now, like I said, this subject matter really is interesting, and I haven't really read Anne Rice's book, although I'm interested in reading it as well because, she's more well known for writing vampire books. But unfortunately, the way this story was told on film, it just doesn't seem to naturally lend itself to this format. Because with this premise, you don't really have anything at stake. Like, the biggest arc here is the fact that Jesus is just kind of growing up. It's hard to do that well. It's hard to be boyhood. So there really is no real suspense. You're not really worried for any of the characters because they're all gonna live, that. I think this movie really should have focused more on Jesus himself, like as a character. Make this a character study about his internal struggle of him reconciling, am I more man than God, or am I equal, or whatever. If you look at Jesus Christ Superstar from the 70s, I think that movie did a fantastic job of really delving into Jesus's internal struggle of character, and he's not even the main character in that movie. One aspect of this film that also really needed to be developed more was the aspect of Jesus's parents. I think it's super interesting to imagine what it must have been like to be Joseph and Mary and be parents to the Son of God. But unfortunately, there's just really nothing to them, as well as the villains. The villains in the movie, there's nothing to them as well. You've got Sean Bean as this Roman centurion, you've got Herod, you've got the incarnation of the devil as well, and none of them are threatening. And the way all the dialogue is written just comes off as very preachy. If you're a devout Christian, you're not gonna learn anything new from this movie. And so the pacing also suffers because there's just no real escalation of stakes here. It feels way too long. It feels like a TV miniseries cut down into feature film length, which is exactly what another biblical film did called Son of God, a couple years ago, I believe, which really was a trimmed down version of the last few episodes of this mini-series called the Bible, and this movie feels like that. Now, one big problem that most biblical movies have is that the directors don't really know how to separate their devotion to the faith from their instincts of making a good film. And Cyrus Nauraste is kinda like that here. He's too reverent, so that this movie ends up kind of just being a disservice to Jesus' character, because all these filmmakers tend to focus too much on the fact that Jesus was God, but they ignore the fact he was also just a human being. And with regard to the actor, Sean Bean looks really bored in this movie. He's obviously just phoning it in, as do the actors who play Jesus' parents. They look bored as well. Rory Keenan, who plays the devil of sorts, and Jonathan Bailey, who plays Herod, are super over the top. And unfortunately, Adam Greaves-Neal, who is the young boy who plays Jesus, he is everything I don't like about bad child actors. It's just so obvious that he's acting. All his line delivery is so stilted, and he makes one face the whole time. And from a production standpoint, there are a lot of things wrong here as well. Biblical movies can't help but look cheap these days, which is understandable because no one sees them, so they're not very popular, so they don't make a lot of money, so no one wants to fund them. And this lack of budget becomes painfully apparent when there are visual effects and stunt work that looks really, really bad. On the positive side, there are a few sets here that seem to be built from the ground up, and they actually look really nice. There are also some very quick shots that are legitimately really good looking, but it's just that they cut away too fast. And if there's one part of this movie that I will really give high praise to. It's Christian McKay, who is this supporting actor here who plays Cleophas, who is Joseph's brother, and he's noticeably very, very good, to the point that you immediately remember him even if he has such a small part. But in the end, The Young Messiah is just meh. It's really mediocre. Again, it's not a very good biblical movie. I do appreciate the new direction they kind of took with this, and I'm hoping that they just keep on continuing, trying to do new things while, upping their production values. Alright, so those are my thoughts on The Young Messiah. Have you guys seen it? What do you think about it? Whether you agree with me or not, please leave me a comment. Let's have a conversation.